Next up, we're looking at wealth management. So it's said that up to 50% of an advisor's time is spent on non-client related tasks. And Jason, I'd love to know what your experience is here. Like, how can Gen AI help to reduce this administrative burden and give advisors more time to really focus on their client-related work?
Yeah, no, it's really true. A significant portion of an advisor's time is consumed by administrative tasks, and those include things like portfolio rebalancing or client reporting or compliance checks and research. So we've seen that same stat that you talked about. Industry estimates suggesting that up to 50% of advisors' work week is dedicated to these non-client facing activities. That inefficiency not only impacts the client satisfaction, but also really reduces the capacity for scaling advisory services. So generative AI has the potential to revolutionize this by automating a variety of these tasks. We look at a couple that I had mentioned, like portfolio rebalancing and reporting. AI tools can automatically generate performance reports. They can manage rebalancing activities, and they can forecast trends based on client-specific risk profiles, or reducing the time that's really spent on these activities. We've seen tools like BlackRock's Aladdin or AI-based portfolio management solutions that have already shown measurable reductions in manual work required by advisors. That's on the portfolio rebalancing and reporting side of it. We've talked a bit already today, I know, about compliance and regulatory reporting, but it's a big topic when it comes to some of the activities that are non-client facing, again, that these advisors are doing. And generative AI models can automate compliance documentation and AML KYC checks, reducing the time spent on these processes, again, by probably about half. This is freeing up advisors to focus on deeper client engagement and strategic financial planning. So again, unlocking the ability to do more for those advisors when it comes to client facing. And then client communications, one that's always interesting is, talk about being client facing. Client communication is obviously an important part of that. But AI driven chatbots and virtual assistants can handle routine inquiries. And that's reducing the time that advisors are spending on client queries. It probably takes about 25% of their time to do some of the basic ones. If we can eliminate that through AI-driven capabilities, it enables the advisors to focus on more personalized, value-added interactions. And then, again, I'll go back to a couple of these examples as we talk through all these topics, because it's important to see it in real life. There's a leading U.S. wealth management firm that's already reported implementing AI-based systems for portfolio management and compliance. And that reduced non-client related activities at that particular wealth manager by 40%, allowed their advisors to increase their client load by an average of 15 to 20% without having to compromise any of the service quality. So good real examples that are already out there today in production.
Exactly. And I think it's really great to keep seeing these examples just, as I guess, like you say, a real life standard of how these things are actually working in practice. And, it's no longer just talk, it's how these things are working day to day on people's laptops, on their desks, the real life experience it's having on their clients. And I want to pull it back to the personalization point you mentioned as well, that I think so much of this discussion keeps returning to. So, for example, in NTT Data's research that we've been discussing, the top reported benefit, as I mentioned, was being able to offer better personalized services with 44% of respondents. So do you believe that AI will enable those really personalized wealth management solutions? And, we've spoken about AI-based systems for portfolio management and chatbots and things like that. But when we speak about other ways of really diving into that personalization and really, really scaling that up, what might that look like for a client?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most exciting advancements in generative AI that we can really achieve. It's already proving its ability to deliver hyper personalization in wealth management solutions that we were talking about. This trend is only accelerating right now, and with AI driven insights, wealth managers can tailor their services in real time based on a client's financial goals, risk tolerance, and life events. And really across all the different segments. So if we do a double click on what does AI enabled personalization look like for clients across different segments, in the mass market segment, AI can automate investment strategies based on individual goals and behaviors, leading to better financial planning. Robo-advisors have been in place for a long time, and those are largely powered now by AI, and they've already driven 25 to 30% cost reductions from wealth management firms. And they're doing that while providing clients with personalized portfolios, investment strategies based on their financial data. And so the clients are benefiting from regular portfolio updates and financial advice that aligns with market conditions, personal preferences, and doing that with very minimal manual intervention from their financial advisors. You move up a segment to the mass affluent segment, and AI can really help the advisors offer more tailored financial products such as tax optimized strategies or retirement planning by analyzing large volumes of data in real time. For example, AI can provide some predictive insights into tax efficient withdrawals or optimal asset allocations, improving some of the financial outcomes by 10 to 15% through just enhanced portfolio performance. And then last segment is the high net worth and ultra high net worth. And for these clients, AI can provide bespoke investment opportunities such as alternative investments, tailored market insights, and risk management strategies that consider global economic trends. Generative AI can forecast various market scenarios based on complex real-time data. And that allows the advisors to present dynamic, adaptive strategies. This could improve client satisfaction and retention by providing much more tailored advice, through this hyper personalization. And we've seen it again out in production today. Large U.S. wealth management firm that's got a global presence. They're using AI-enabled personalization tools, and they saw an increase in client engagement by 20%. And they also reported a 15% reduction in portfolio churn. So as AI-driven insights allows advisors to offer better, more efficient financial advice to align very much to the client preferences. So, and I know, Dan, I said a lot there, so maybe I'll summarize it a little bit because sometimes it's a lot to digest. But Gen AI is really going to create hyper personalization by learning from client interactions. These interactions could be web navigation, call center recordings, advisor interactions, to really understand the client behaviors and prediction of needs and expanded services. So using that data is going to create these customized messaging around catch-up contribution eligibility, in the wealth management space, or beneficiary data to drive additional products. Can help the advisors monitor life events and changes to make product recommendations as well. It could be a 529 account when a child's born.
I think it's always really worth examining. And yeah, that's a really good overview, because I think it's always worth looking at, we're talking so much about the banks and what they get, and that's very important. And it's also worth looking at from the customer's perspective when they're choosing between banks, or they're sort of looking at their experience with their wealth management service, kind of what do they get out of it as well? Because that's, I guess, how banks can really understand what's driving the most benefit for their customers. So I think maybe looking at the other side of it now, where we sort of briefly touched on regulation earlier and perhaps some of the dangers that AI can help avert. Let's talk about fraud and financial crime briefly. So, looking at the research run by NTT Data, we found that banks are having to invest far more in detection technologies and more advanced security. So I guess it's almost self-evident that this might be a growing problem for banks, but with this kind of Gen AI driven fraud as well that's on the rise, these kind of false documents, these deep fakes, this kind of thing, is that making fraud detection tools geared specifically for Gen AI kind of a natural counter to these problems?
Yeah, there's a bit of a fight fire with fire in some regards. And it's really unfortunate that We always have to talk about this topic, but it is a growing problem for banks. And they are increasing their investment in the fraud detection. So our NTT data research highlighted that banks are significantly ramping up investments in fraud detection technologies and advanced security measures. The increasing sophistication of fraud and the speed at which can be conducted really requires this heightened investment in protection and detection right now. The investment can come in multiple forms, whether that's leveraging fintechs with evolving detection methods or deploying Gen AI and AI tools alike, for that matter, to uncover individual as well as broad schemes, more real time. It's leveraging more third-party data sources to verify customers and transactions. All are intended to protect the bank from financial and reputational harm. If the banks did nothing, it's going to erode customer trust, and the regulators will significantly increase pressure to ensure that they've got these effective measures in place. And you kind of talked about this in the question about, why are we seeing this ramp up in investment? What's driving it? Unfortunately, it's primarily due to sophistication of threats. The ongoing digitalization of banking services has introduced more sophisticated fraud tactics. Gen AI enables speed and sophistication of the fraudster side, especially as it relates to account takeover and deep fakes. And as a result, there's a critical need for enhanced fraud prevention systems to effectively counter these evolving threats. And it goes back to banks are going to be fighting fire with fire as they use Gen AI to help prevent new threats that are driven by Gen AI.
I think and like you said earlier, let's maybe double click on one of those things where we're speaking about fraud detection and how you actually break the process down of fighting fraud detection. So you've mentioned that kind of upfront prevention. So, how do you stop fraud even before it happens? And then I guess post that, if something slips by, how can you then kind of post transaction? How can you detect that fraud has happened? How can banks make sure they're more in the first camp and that their systems are more set up to prevent fraud before it happens?
Yeah, they're going to have to be in both camps for sure. But the first part of it, the upfront detection, is designed to proactively prevent fraud through a couple of different tactics: identity verification, transaction monitoring, as well as risk scoring. So if you implement robust identity verification processes to ensure that the individuals are who they claim to be before you grant access to financial services, you can do a lot up front. And then, secondly, is that AI-driven transaction monitoring. It's using artificial intelligence to monitor transactions in real time and identify and assess potential threats. Includes things like risk scoring systems that are assigning risk scores to transactions or accounts to proactively identify and mitigate fraudulent activities at the entry point. So, these are things that are all methods to hopefully proactively stop fraudulent activities before they actually occur. And I'm happy to talk about the post-transaction side as well.
Yeah, they're definitely, like you say, it's always, we always aim for prevention, but not always possible. So looking at this post-transaction detection side, often, like we've mentioned earlier, Gen AI, one of its incredible strengths is this ability to pattern match. So this post-transaction side, it often relies on recognizing these patterns of suspicious behavior and flagging them to a human, or indeed to another automated system. So from your side, how do you think Gen AI can improve the accuracy and the efficiency of these detection systems?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the post-transaction detection, you can see methods that include suspicious pattern recognition. That's the analyzing transaction data to identify patterns or behaviors that are indicative of fraud after a transaction's taken place. You can leverage the similar transaction monitoring systems that we were talking about in the upfront detection. And these systems continuously monitor and flag abnormal behaviors or patterns that are typical of fraudulent activities. So as an example, Gen AI can curate transaction history and customer level detail agnostic of the case management platform at the bank. And that's giving the bank a broad, cohesive view of details and summarizations in much less time, which can be used to inform preventive algorithms. Um, this can identify unusual transaction behaviors or detect anomalies based on user behavior, or those behaviors could be related to things like the customer's login times or locations, their device use. But the important part of this is can detect those at a much faster speed, scale, accuracy than what we could do before without the technology in place. And again, that's really helping capture more legitimate transactions and reducing those false positives. And in addition to the pattern recognition, Gen AI can enhance predictive analytics, differentiate between scam and fraud, and understand customer profiles using enhanced risk scoring that continuously monitors the transactions and updates risk scores very dynamically. It can be used then for performing look back and look ahead analysis prior fraud cases. This is going to help determine how likely a current alert may be aligned with known synthetic identities or emerging patterns of fraud or other illicit activity. So certainly a very hot topic these days that the banks are exploring.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, like you said, not just to talk about the pattern matching side, but also to talk about the importance of reducing those false positives. Because I know there's so much focus on the cost savings and reducing the amount of person hours needed to review some of these things. So I imagine there's a lot of focus on not just how can we speed up these processes, how can we automate them, but also how can we make sure that the humans that we employ to do these jobs are kind of only getting given the cases we really need them to look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's a lot more to explore and a lot more in depth that we could go into on that topic for sure.
100%. As we look to the future of AI in banking, what do you see as the biggest opportunities? So we've covered a wide range of use cases, a wide range of benefits, all the various different segments and sectors who can benefit from this technology. What do you think are, I guess, the key areas to watch out for, and any potential risks or limitations that decision makers should be aware of?
Yeah, and it's so hard to pinpoint, what we'll say is the biggest because
Hmm.
it's going to have such an impact across the entire banking ecosystem. But the one that I think is most exciting and that I'm personally most excited about is the improved customer experience, and doing so at a level of productivity and personalization and efficiency that was really never possible to unlock before. I really think that is the one that a lot of folks are most excited about. Some of this stems from really the real-time learning and adaptation of AI's ability to, I'll call it, learn from data in real time, which is allowing for dynamic adjustments to detection systems that we were talking about. Improving those preventative risk measures, lowering the compliance cost. Those compliance costs have been steadily increasing at the banks over the last decade. And so now having tools in place to reverse that trend, which is going to help them unlock dollars in budget to reinvest in other things back into the customer experience and new innovation as well. So I think that part's really exciting. And then you highlighted the potential risk side of this equation as well. And again, it's a lot of times we talk about this with all the optimism and excitement, but would really be remiss if we didn't also talk about the potential risks. So it's essential to consider the risks associated with AI-driven fraud detection, such as biases in algorithms or occurrence of false positives. This can impact both the effectiveness and the fairness of detection systems. So ethical AI, which is a very hot topic, those considerations should be in place whenever it's being adopted. And there's going to be additional AI regulations that are in place, as well as need for additional governance. So adopting and adapting to the evolving regulatory requirements is crucial for ensuring that AI-driven strategies remain compliant and effective in the face of changing legal landscapes. So I think that's going to be one of those restrictive hurdles, as you talked about, that we're going to continue to see evolve, and banks are going to continue to deal with.
Definitely, I think those are four great areas to look at, and like you said, we could talk about this all day, and then probably some. I think so. I think if anyone is interested in hearing more from Jason and NTT Data, NTT Data will be exhibiting at the upcoming Cybos and Money 2020 conferences later this year, and Jason himself will be at Money 2020 on a panel. Would you like to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we've actually broadly about Money 2020. We've got a really good group of folks across NTT Data that are joining. Some of our payments experts, some of our banking leaders. So anybody that wants to explore this more at 2020, be happy to do so. And then the panel that you mentioned, we have a couple of really good panelists from different banks. We're going to be exploring the topic around open banking. And what it means for the U.S. and how the U.S. can learn from what has happened throughout the other geographies and other places of the world in open banking. So excited to see that, and feel free for anybody that's going to be attending the conference to reach out to me if you want to know more about that panel and when it's going to be and how to get into it.
Perfect. And I guess as one last piece to sign off, what do you expect are going to be some of the key themes about AI and innovation at banking in these events? What do you think? Obviously, I'm sure Gen AI will come up time and time again, but how do you think the real thrust of the conversation will be there?
Yeah, it's going to come up time and time again. Won't be able to escape it. We started the conversation with the stat from the research that 97% of the banks have reported adopting a Gen AI strategy. Clearly it's on everybody's mind, and it's going to be safe to say that that's likely going to be one of the most frequent topics at the conference. But we've talked throughout this podcast about the fact that there's a lot of research and discussion about what's anticipated to come for future use cases and benefits of generative AI, and the fact that really only a portion of the banks have implemented those strategies into their core operations. So I expect that at both Cybos as well as Money 2020, the dialogues that's going to generate the most interest at these conferences is going to be around current implementations, the real cost of the implementation, the real outcomes, the real values that banks have experienced in production right here and right now. We've tried to give some examples as we talked through some of these scenarios earlier today, but I'm really excited for NTT Data to share those credentials and those examples that are live and in production, not just the things that are going to come in the future.
Yeah, like you say, there's so much exciting stuff coming down the line, but there's also an incredible amount of stuff that's already happening today. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights. It's been really fascinating to hear not only how Gen AI is driving innovation across wealth management, but also across payments and fraud detection and beyond. And I think especially, as we've said, what that looks like in the real world. And to our listeners, we hope you also found today's conversation interesting. New AI products and services are being released every day, and the opportunities it presents for the banking sector in efficiency, security, and particularly in customer experience are only getting better. If you'd like to learn more about these trends or explore how your organization can benefit, be sure to check out NTT Data's latest research and stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you and goodbye.